Hello, everybody. No, that's not just you, Knocked. No sound.
Oh, okay.
Editorial goof up. But we're bringing you Block Digest number 131 on October 10th at block height 545,189.
All
So,
right.
what is up?
Oh, nothing, man. We're all just trying to get this thing going together. Yeah, man. It's been busy on the back end of things, man. But it's been nice, man. Had some family in town. I took care of them. Got some leftover red beans in the fridge, and now there's snow on the ground. So yeah, it's time to focus in on all this stuff that's been going on. How's things been going, Janine Shinobi?
I mean, I've been having quite an interesting day because, yeah, I mean, I'll get into it when I have the story, but oh my God, the amount of absolute craziness around the civil thing. Um, like, I mean, I keep saying to people, I'm not even an expert in this stuff, but it's so easy to pick it apart because everyone just keeps making the same mistakes. And so I'll try to be civil, not that kind of civil when I do my report.
Yeah, it's hard to. I don't know. It's just funny. I mean, how people. Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of an understanding of these data structures just gives you such a step ahead of the game, and a lot of people are just lost out there. That's what we're all starting to figure out. So, yeah, let's be civil about figuring out what's going on out there.
No, I won't be civil because
Yeah.
the fucking boot sector on my laptop hard drive died and it's a fucking soldered in SSD. So, no, fuck you.
Oh
Fuck your
yeah, you see,
civility.
this
Fuck
is what's
Google.
causing all
Fuck
this
everything.
Google censorship is this incivility and this anonymity. You are causing the censorship, Shinobi.
No, fuck Google. All right, let's dive into the Optech breakdown. So, first bit is a little summary of the Scaling Bitcoin conference in Tokyo, and quite frankly, I am kind of agitated about their breakdown because it's missing the most important talk, in my opinion, which was Lalu's breakdown of multi-party channels, which I highly suggest everybody watch. It's I think day 1, video 4 that it's part in, but they break down Anthony Town's talk on adjusting the block subsidy, which was frankly a ridiculously absurd talk that consisted mostly of him rationalizing smoothing out the inflation curve because Bitcoin uses too much energy. And why are we using too much energy? Well, what about like miners going out of business with the halvings and supply shocks? And like, frankly, um, like, no, get the fuck out of here. Like one, the argument that energy consumption is too high, that's for the market to decide, not you. And two, doing anything to fuck with the block subsidy or the inflation schedule, just no. Like it's baked in. It is a core part of the protocol. We've had 2 halvings so far, and the entire multi-billion-dollar mining industry has pretty much made all of their investments and plans based on the current inflation schedule. No, we're not just going to start playing economic engineer because you think it's bad some businesses could go bankrupt. That's how markets work. Deal with it. They also break down Mark Friedenbach's forward blocks attack. And I was a little off in terms of the mechanisms that would be used to actually facilitate this, but the end result is pretty much the same thing. Like this is just a hard fork where you completely rewrite the consensus rules to whatever you want and then effectively time warp the original chain, attack it, spam it with a bunch of blocks in a denial of service attack, and turn it into a kind of slave chain where nodes get spammed with way more data than they can process and have absolutely nothing they can do about it. Like this, This talk was one kind of disappointing in the retardedly complex Rube Goldberg machine just hackiness of it, but it's also this is an attack. This is an attack on the network, and the fact that Mark can sit there on stage and pitch this as an upgrade is unbelievable. It's a mechanism that allows miners to pretty much spam nodes and increase their operational costs without their users' permissions. That's an attack. Like I don't care how you try to rationalize it. That is attacking the network. That is a denial of service, and that is without any recourse or ability to actually have to opt into it, a way to raise the cost of running a node to the point that people will be knocked off the network with no recourse. That completely undermines a core consensus rule of Bitcoin. No. There was also a talk by Dan Bona on the MUSIG design from Schnorr. I actually didn't watch this talk. There's a few I missed, but MUSIG is pretty much right now the Schnorr proposal would allow like N of N multi-sig with collaborative signatures, but there's still some issues to work out in K of N signatures where you have different subsets signing off on things. So that would probably be an interesting talk to watch through, and that's one of the big things that needs to get worked out in terms of really realizing the full functionality of Schnorr. Dan Bona actually also had another talk, although I don't believe he presented this one, on using RSA accumulators as a potential replacement for Merkle trees and commitments to things. Well, one of the ideas this was mostly pitched for is UTXO set commitments, but there is kind of the issue of something, an accumulator like this pretty much requires something akin to a trusted setup currently. And despite in the talk, the presenter kind of discussing the fact that there are accumulators out there, it's very efficient to add and remove things from one of these that exist where the party that set it up is no longer in existence. So, you know, this could be a pretty useful thing in terms of UTXO set commitments where akin to like Peter Todd's latest proposal, I think, where there's no real consensus. It's not folded into the actual network consensus process. It's just a relative web of trust where like I can go interact with somebody I have some trust-based relationship with and use something like this as a basis to interact. I think it can be very useful there. But I personally wouldn't really feel comfortable trying to fold this into some kind of objective UTXO set commitment that people would be bootstrapping nodes off from random people. But it's still nonetheless a pretty interesting concept. This was one of the things that I was kind of just like, what the fuck? Because in the scheduling and everything that was out before the conference, it made it seem like this was a pitch to completely replace Merkle trees in the block structure. And although this is one of the uses they pitched it for, I think things like UTXO set commitments are a place where this could actually have a valid use and not have the impracticality of deprecating all software in the ecosystem. There was also a talk on scriptless script for ECDSA signatures. So that's also kind of something interesting. Like clearly a lot of developers are putting work into getting Schnorr ready with a concrete specification for proposal, but you know, it's can't hurt to bring that kind of functionality back to ECDSA signatures as well. So something else to look at. And then really just a summary of a discussion group that took place there in terms of the evolution of the Bitcoin script language. And it was mostly just dealing with the Schnorr signature scheme and then the SIG hash no input opcode, which is obviously kind of what L2 is requiring to actually be a functional thing, so that you can spend a transaction without pointing at an input, just an encumbrance script. and then Optech SIG from Stack. This is something to enable covenants where you could, for instance, have a cold wallet where you can spend from it, and then for a week time lock, all you can do is spend it back to your cold storage wallet and have to wait for that time lock to expire before sending to any other address. I'm not really a big fan of covenants at all. I think that they fundamentally undermine fungibility in that you either have to make them publicly known, in which case they stand out from other coins, and kind of deviate from a lot of the work going into things like Taproot and Graftroot, where you're hiding all of the complex conditions of things. And if you weren't to make it publicly clear that it's in a covenant, then you pretty much undermine every single transaction on the network because you're not aware whether this can actually be yanked back or not. And the issue of fixing the time warp bug, obviously something I'm a huge fan of in light of forward blocks. And then a discussion of explicit fees in the transaction format. So right now, fees are just kind of implied in like the difference between inputs and outputs. And there was some discussion about allowing that difference to be aggregated into a specific output in a transaction. And part of or at least one of the reasons for considering this is to kind of simplify the process of rewarding a watchtower in Lightning Network that submits a remedy transaction in response to a theft attempt. But overall, yeah, scaling Bitcoin was not really that impressive in my opinion. And really the only things that I found interesting or nice concepts were Lalu's talk again on multi-party channels. I think everybody should watch this. This is something I have been very skeptical on since channel factories were proposed outside of just using them to improve routing liquidity for the network. But after Lalu's presentation, I'm really kind of rethinking the safety or the utility that can be gotten in using those the way that they were originally proposed, which is purely for funding channels and actually using them to transact. And then Ruben Sansom, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, one of the organizers of the Seoul meetup in South Korea, had an interesting idea called a state chain, which was kind of like it was kind of like a weird hybrid between a federated sidechain, a time lock commitment structure, and then kind of synergized, allowing Lightning Network to function on top of it. But it was a really interesting trust model where there is a requirement to trust a central party or a federation that would function as a central party to ensure that theft wouldn't happen. But in the trade-off for that, you have a setup where that party doesn't actually have custody of the funds that they're kind of federating. And it's obviously not a peer-to-peer, truly decentralized solution like Lightning Network itself, but I still think it was a pretty interesting construct in terms of what you can do with second layer solutions, kind of in the middle ground between something completely custodial and something completely decentralized. But I would highly recommend everybody check out at least those two talks if they didn't watch the conference live when it happened. And there goes Optech.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check those talks out, man. It's hard to find those good presentations at some of these conferences, and yeah, I'm gonna check that Lelu multi-channels out, and yeah, I mean it's good to see that these Schnorr alternatives coming up, or somebody's just testing that out to see where the best efficiencies are. But this whole like Anthony Towns with this adjusting the block subsidy, man, and the and this slave chain, that's the forward blocks. It's pretty crazy that's like some of the presentations they chose to pick out and discuss. But we'll look into it. We'll see how things go. But yeah, Bitcoin Optech. Appreciate the update.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I guess I'm just gonna dive right into first big story. So a internal Google slide deck was leaked yesterday, and I'm gonna have to fight here to not get incredibly pissed off. But the title of the slide deck is "The Good Censor." How can Google reassure the world that it protects users from harmful content while still supporting free speech?
Well, safe
Well,
space.
I don't know how many of you are punk rock fans, but this makes me think of the band Dead Kennedys, which in the 80s was actually raided by the LAPD. Over 20 officers storming into this guy's house, tearing everything apart, guns drawn. And you know what the reason was? An impressionist German painting of penises in mud that was in one of their album covers. And they literally raided the lead singer's house as if he was a cocaine dealer for half of America and made an entire public case out of charging him with distribution of harmful matter to minors. So this slide deck is just there's that little tinge of truth and reality to the issue they're discussing. And then there's just the insane rationalization for just completely skewed perspective and the overall attempt by a lot of Silicon Valley to just ram their politics down everybody's throats and justifying the increasingly totalitarian means of policing their platforms in response to people effectively wrong thinking and holding politics or beliefs that people who run these companies don't agree with. So obviously, like the real issue here is the more social media and the more these platforms have kind of proliferated, the more it has just created echo chambers and kind of stifled the ability to actually have meaningful discourse or dialogue across parties who disagree with things. And I mean, this is a real undeniable dynamic that is undeniably having real effects and consequences on society at large. But this is not something unique to the internet. This is not something that just started happening that didn't happen before. It's just happening at a scale and to a degree that we haven't seen before because there has never been a medium of communication that is this far reaching and this frictionless in terms of the ability for people to just interact with anybody in the world. And the way that they've kind of framed this entire struggle in this document is a dynamic between American values of freedom of speech and expression overall versus European values, where dignity and safety, air quotes, comes first. And they've painted this picture of tech companies in Silicon Valley that all started proclaiming to uphold those American values, to push for freedom of speech and interaction above all else. And over the last 10 years, they specifically say most companies in Silicon Valley have slid completely across the aisle into this more European attitude that dignity and safety must come first. But this is kind of the abstract of their rationalization for just increasing lockdown, censorship, and pushing people off of their platform. And more specifically, some of the examples of why they're arguing that this is necessary is just absolutely fucking absurd. Absolutely. The US election in 2016. So, conservatives won a presidential election. And this still perpetual meme that the only reason that happened is Russian interference in the election. It's not just that a lot of these people have completely lost touch with the average population. It's Russian collusion. Conservative parties such as Britain First or the party AfD in Germany are being branded the alt-right and Nazis. But again, this is literally Nazis rising to power again. It's not just more conservative-minded people that they have completely lost touch with. A protest against a art exhibit in Brazil that dealt with homosexuality and, more importantly, pedophilia that eventually was shut down because of huge online protests. Now, there are some instances of legitimate things, such as the entire Logan Paul issue, where he pretty much live streamed him seeing a suicide victim in the suicide forest in Japan. But yeah, the 2 points that they kind of drive home subtly and not so subtly in this are effectively that conservatives are asserting themselves in the political process and using things like the internet to coordinate that. And at the very end, extremist content like ISIS, which is really, in my perspective, just the most fucking absurd thing in the world. When you look around at all of the conservative people being knocked off of these platforms left and right, and compare that to how long things like ISIS websites or ISIS accounts and videos will actually remain up onto these or on these platforms, compared to a conservative person who effectively just goes, no, I disagree with liberal positions or attitudes. And they literally state somewhere in this document that politicians being able to take advantage of this confusion because of how frictionless communications is, i.e. conservative politicians whose politics they disagree with, is the result of bad behavior on the user's parts, which is a phrase that is consistently brought up in connection to them pointing at conservatives as a symptom of users' bad behavior. And so this is an 85-page slide deck, and I encourage everybody to actually look through it. It might sound like a lot, but obviously it's a slide deck and not a book, so I think you guys can get through it pretty fast. But this is just the most insane thing in the world. Like, Google right now is literally building a censored search engine for the Chinese government where they will pass off every bit of data they collect to a Chinese company in the Chinese government's pockets. And this is the kind of shit that they're talking about internally. This is how internally they are discussing this entire issue of how far do we go in which direction. Censor everything that is distasteful or we disagree with, or allow absolutely anything that is not direct incitement of violence to exist on these platforms. And the most ironic thing is, despite all of this shit trying to demonize conservatives and use it as a justification for this, they actually praise a group from Germany on Facebook that has 28,000 people who specifically go around harassing anybody whose comments that they deem bad comments or hate speech, despite in this deck in multiple places complaining about harassment on the internet. So like something has to be done about this. And I am absolutely not a fan of attempting to deal with this in the way the telephone companies were. I am not a fan of government stepping in and trying to regulate these things as public utilities or media companies or any of the things that give government that backdoor to just start piling in more and more regulations and laws where they can entrench companies like this and have more of a direct influence on what they do or don't do. But something has to be done about this, because they are undeniably hugely important aspects of interacting in the digitized society of the 21st century. And this is literally where they're going. If you do what we disagree with, you are wrongthink. You must be shut out of these platforms. You must be shut out of social discourse at large. You must be turned into a pariah. And this is absolutely not a viable way to cultivate a free society in the digital age. This is how you stomp it out.
Yeah, man, it's like I was, going through the stories. You posted this kind of late. I ended up staying up real late going through all 85 of these slides. And, I mean, I've got some pretty strong opinions from my experiences with, what America should be doing and our freedoms and civil liberties and all that stuff. And to see it, like you're saying, basically, it's just it's a narrative being built to where these liberties that we've been afforded for a long time can be just taken away because you're making me feel uncomfortable. I wrote up some notes on this, and like you're saying, I don't want to dig too much into this because we got the slide deck for people to dig into, and we'll go a little too crazy on it. But like on slide 69, they said that governments were unhappy to cede power to corporations. But on slide 42, they show censorship requests from government entities were low until around 2013, where it rose slightly before, this 2016 election, where it took a dramatic shift up. Where if you look at the reality on the ground, where, why would that government censorship be requested after Trump's election, whenever most of the censorship seems to be against this faction, this right, or whatever they want to call it. And, the censorship has mainly all been against this right, or what Dems could label anyone alt-right. And in fact, in slide 19, they cite the rise of the alt-right as a recent global event that undermined the free speech utopia of the internet. But, I'm sorry, free speech is not always speech you agree with. And this all shows that this is the government's whipping Google, or all this shows that this isn't the government's really whipping Google or these companies into censorship, but it's the tech companies that are building the narrative to keep people divisive and are unhappy with the election of Trump. And we could dig into this. People could probably have a 2-hour discussion on just this. And
one last thing I want to mention is they specifically in the slide tried to paint Donald Trump accusing Google of favoring Hillary Clinton in search results during the election as a conspiracy theory that resulted from the bad behavior of users on their platforms, when this is an objective fact that was independently confirmed through research, that the search results were being heavily skewed in favor of Hillary compared to any other candidate, in very much the same way that for the past few elections that Ron Paul has pretty much been dismissed and manipulated by platforms like these and the mainstream media as well.
Yeah, like you're saying, there's a tinge of truth to some of this stuff, but the argument of bad behavior being the reason to be the good censor and destroy something that has taken a very long time to establish, the idea of free speech and free ideas and expression, and trying to the battle of ideas, and that wins the day. And we're regressing back to it's just really, really disturbing to me as someone that thinks of Google as this American corporation or whatever, and same with all these other tech companies that are kind of being piled into this. And they're supposed to be standing for these values, but now they have a lot of power and they've been wielding it, and now they're wielding it in a way to where they can build this narrative to try and just extract more liberties from people who, I mean, like once these things go away, there's not really coming back. It's going to take bloodshed to come back. So, yeah, maybe I should just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. All right, though. Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm going to slide along. Some good, actually, Bitcoin-related news directly, at least. TxTenna and Samurai Wallet have officially launched the TxTenna app, which is a specifically designed app to pair with a TxTenna and relay Bitcoin transactions across the mesh network until they reach an internet-connected Android device that is running this application, which will then take the transaction and relay it to the Bitcoin network on the internet proper. And so this is a fucking awesome thing, because we've been seeing Samurai Wallet and TxTenna kind of tinkering with this for quite a while, and the application is now actually here. And there's really a couple different benefits from this. I mean, ultimately, to pull something from this Google slide, only 25% of the world really lives in a place where the internet is completely uncensored, air quotes, so to say. And there are a lot of countries on this planet where there is active deep packet inspection, where your ISPs are monitoring and filtering everything that you do, and could very much potentially start censoring Bitcoin activity. This provides an alternative. Yet another benefit is, through a mesh network like this, you are adding a whole nother level of obscuring the origin of a transaction as it propagates through a mesh network before it actually hits an internet connected node and moves into the Bitcoin network itself and starts propagating to miners. So like this is just overall a fucking awesome thing. And honestly, I want to see this take the next step further. Like, I want to see them start tinkering with, I don't know, why can't the TxTenna network take a compact block, which isn't really that much bigger. It's really just the size of a pretty big transaction in most cases, and propagate that. Like, how far can we actually go in terms of integrating Bitcoin functionality into this mesh network, which is really, like, the last time I fucking looked at the map of all the TxTenna nodes on the planet, I'm still amazed at the size of this, considering really this is kind of a very niche service and something that a lot of people really wouldn't care about. But like, how far can we go in terms of actually integrating this into the Bitcoin network itself? Because I really would like to see something like this pushed to the absolute extreme. And let's see how far we can go in actually decentralizing the infrastructure that Bitcoin runs on.
Yeah, I believe that the main use case, or the original reason that TxTenna was created, was for people that want to like go off the grid, for example, for hiking or camping, and they're worried that they're not going to have cellular data, so it allows them to connect to nearby peers. So yeah, I mean that does sound very niche to me. So I am surprised it would be quite large already, but that's cool because I mean, there are a lot of people in Bitcoin. For example, Peter Todd, when he was at Parallel Polis just recently, they were talking about this on a live stream about TxTenna, and I'm sure he'll be using this because he says he lives out in the middle of nowhere. So
heck yeah, man, this is like really awesome to see such a fast moving development, because it seems like not too long ago we just discussed the possibility of this, and now it's already rolled out on I think it's the Google Play Store for Android right now. And I mean, like, geez, there's some guys in town, like we've talked about many times, lots of blockchain guys excited about here, and some of them are excited about mesh networks. And I'm thinking, if I go over there with this sort of information and start talking to these guys, maybe we can, like, you know, get some more people jazzed to try and build this stuff out as much as possible. Because certainly there's some stuff to be done. You know, it's not just like the transaction TxTenna and the GoTenna and, you know, off internet transactions. That's the end of all of it. Like I could see it, being built out similarly to where, you know, it builds its own little niche and its own little market, and it'll be interesting, man. I'm like really psyched and jazzed. Kind of upset I didn't throw the samurai guys in the artwork today, man. I was trying to fandangle so much stuff last night. But yeah, guys, this is awesome work, man. Really good job. I can't wait to, you know, see it continue expanding outward, and we're gonna see this. Yeah, I mean, because this is very powerful. I mean, like you're saying, only 25% really have the access to the internet, so it's really like a huge market there. It's just waiting to be, you know, somebody's gonna make some sort of money on that, where it's like there's nobody serving that market. Here's an ability to do that. I mean, you know, just let's get the apps, let's get the things to going together.
Yeah, and I mean, I really like Samurai Wallet in general. I think they're one of the very unique wallets in the space that actually puts a lot of effort into not only being privacy focused, but also censorship resistant focused. Most wallets don't do that. They just, you know, build software that holds your keys, and most of them are the same. They don't really differentiate as much as I would hope that they do, but Samurai definitely does that. So yeah, lots of good things happening. And I don't know if you guys mentioned this already, but yeah, it's like in a combination of the mesh network with GoTenna and also using satellites like Blockstream satellite, those services. I was actually surprised because last year most people were barely even talking about this, because the whole BGP thing came up where, oh, Bitcoin is vulnerable to this BGP hack. And then I believe it was BGP. And then and you know, everyone was so worried about that, like, look, you can destroy Bitcoin. And then within a year, we're like, oh, we have other options already.
Yeah, it's gonna be great to see this. And I got, yeah, another shout out for Samurai for doing the thing with privacy and that. And also, I really think they're right on target with going to the Satoshi denomination. I know there's been a little bit of pushback from the community, but I think they're doing the right thing.
All right, though, Janine, you want to take us into this rant over the stupidity of journalists?
Oh, but let's be civil.
Yeah, I mean, I've already got my rant out on Twitter, so I don't really need to do that much more. I just kind of want to summarize some key points. Basically, in the last day or so, I don't remember. I saw the tweet from Forbes Crypto yesterday, but I'm not sure if that was the day they actually tweeted it. But basically, I made this rant about Forbes announcing recently that they were partnering with Civil, which is a consensus with a Y, the Ethereum one. It's a consensus funded platform for, quote, ethical journalism. And I had already known about Civil since I think at least October or so last year. That's when I first heard about it, because somehow I heard about the consensus funding of like $5 million or so. I don't know if that was in dollars or Ether, $5 million worth of Ether, no idea, but they got a big funding from consensus last year, and that's how I heard about it. But even though it's been literally a year since I heard about it, actually, it hasn't changed the fact that I am still extremely confused about how this thing is even intended to work. I'm still figuring that out. So yesterday I tweeted a thread about things that I did know that they were intending to do that were wrong, or things they were saying that they were going to do that were wrong. And that was based on both previous documents that I had read, such as the beta version of their so-called constitution and the roadmap that they released, and obviously these new announcements on the partnership with Forbes. And I don't want to rehash too much of what I laid out in the thread, which is linked in the description if you want to read the whole thing. But one main thing that I really want to drive home is that contrary to what Forbes is claiming, and also a lot of, like, I have so many civil employees or partners in my mentions right now, like trying to dig apart my thread, and they're not doing a very good job. And one of the things that one of them said was reflected in the article, where Forbes claimed that they were the first major media organization to do this kind of publishing on the blockchain, or publishing using a blockchain, or journalism on the blockchain. That is absolutely not true. Like, first of all, you have WikiLeaks, which was publishing hashes and torrent links to their documents since at least 2013, such as the Cablegate files. So they've been using the Bitcoin blockchain specifically for a while. You also have projects like Steemit, which, as much as I don't like them, and I have absolutely no interest in using them, and I think it's bound to fail and can't deliver on any censorship resistance in any meaningful sense, they've still been doing blockchain, this blockchain publishing stuff for more than 2 years now. And how do I know that? Well, there is actually a Forbes article from January 2017, which says the following: censorship resistant publishing. Let me see. Due to the immutable and tamper-proof nature of blockchains, Steemit is completely free from censorship, meaning no advertisements can be hidden from view, nor can user comments be edited. That was a quote from Scott, who I think is the CEO or one of the leaders of Steemit. So Forbes actually published an article about how Steemit was doing publishing on the blockchain last year. So it's not like they're not aware of them. Sure, they're not like, they kept focusing on the major part. Like, yes, I understand that Steemit is not a major media publishing organization, obviously, because they're doing this stuff and it's not that attractive to people. But I just always get annoyed when new projects like this come out and they don't explain how they're differentiating from previous iterations that other people have tried. It just shows either they don't know, or they aren't differentiating and they don't want people to notice that, or they're afraid of their competition. It just comes off looking bad. There's no way that they come off looking good by not acknowledging past iterations of this stuff. So I didn't appreciate that. And according to Maria, the editor of, I think it's called Popula, which is another media organization that is collaborating with Civil, apparently neither Steemit nor WikiLeaks count as examples of like prior iterations of publishing on the blockchain, which I not only find to be weird and completely wrong, but in the case of WikiLeaks, which is a major media organization like Forbes, because Forbes actually covered the fact that they were a media organization like 8 years ago when they were first becoming a household name around the world. I find it disrespectful for someone like her to say, no, they're not an example of, something we should learn from or whatever, because whatever, she didn't give reasons. But it's like, I'm sorry, but who are you again? Like, never heard of Popula before I even looked at the Civil announcement. Have you ever published anything that's worth censoring before? I don't know. But like, I just find it weird that they just want to completely ignore these examples, probably because I don't know, it's marketing bullshit. And here's a quote directly from their roadmap document that I did not include in my main tweet thread, because I just didn't come up, but I used it in a response to one of them when they were like answering stuff in my thread. And it says, our journey to a fully decentralized permanent archive of civil content will consist of a number of phases. Our goal is to get as many peers to pin content as possible, i.e. store in their hard drive this content. This increases the redundancy and durability. Our first phase will use a hosted IPFS provider, Infura. You can think of them like the Amazon Web Services of the blockchain world. They run hosted Ethereum and IPFS nodes. At launch, every article published on the blockchain will also be on IPFS. However, it will only be pinned by a single party. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know if I have to explain why that's completely bullshit and hilarious, and this is such a twisting of terminology that I find so common in these token projects, you can't just, I don't know what to tell these people. You can't just slap your business model onto a decentralized or distributed network and call yourselves decentralized. Decentralization is not some kind of magical pixie dust that transfers to you when you touch things that are decentralized. This is basically the equivalent of like Coinbase coming out and saying, we're decentralized, guys, because we buy and sell Bitcoin, which is decentralized, even though they have the ability to completely shut down their access point, which is basically what Civil is. It's acting as an access point to IPFS or to the Ethereum token network, the Ethereum network where they're publishing, and the token contract. They are the access point. And so, you know, their internal governance structure, if you actually go through their constitution document, which I have linked in the description, it's, I mean, I don't know. It just sounds very hierarchical to me. And like, it's nice. You're using decentralized infrastructure. That's great. But if you are talking about authorities, which they do in their document, if you're using authorities to describe the governance model of your system, it's not decentralized. Like, it's really not that hard to tell the difference when someone is bullshitting about this stuff. If they say authority, and they're not saying everyone is an independent authority, not decentralized. Like, at the very best, this is distributed, but I don't even know if it's at that point yet, because they barely started. Oh, by the way, one of the things I mentioned in the thread is that they've already done the token sale last month before they even have media partners who are actually using this thing, or maybe they already have partners that are using it. I have no idea. I've heard of no one who is participating in this thing. But yeah, you know, token sales, not decentralized, dude. Like, and I got in an argument with Maria about that too, because she commented below my tweet about the token sale, and she said, well, decentralized systems can't start out decentralized. They have to start out centralized. And I'm like, no. Satoshi did not pre-mine or pre-sell Bitcoin. He just released the software and then people mined it themselves. And she seemed to she thought I was mocking her about, like, or I was getting it wrong about, she thought I was talking about software distribution, not coin distribution, even though her original reply to me was specifically about the token sale. So I said, no, this conversation is about the token sale. It's centralized if you have one party that is determining who can buy and sell tokens. And in order to get these tokens, you not only have to have US dollars or Ether, you also have to pass some kind of test that they give that determines whether you understand the basic functions of the system, which, oh my God, how many people, I don't even know how this thing is working. So I don't know who passes that test. But yeah, like, sorry, coin distribution through a pre-sale is not decentralized. Sorry, guys. And you don't have to do a pre-sale in order to build a decentralized network. Another funny thing, I really don't know whether they plan to publish full content to the Ethereum blockchain, or if they plan to publish the metadata, because based on the announcements say metadata, but then in an article from Maria on popula.com, she says, we'll be archiving permanent incorruptible text versions of our work onto the Ethereum blockchain, which is obviously content, like text is content. It's not metadata. So I really don't even know what they're doing. And she cited as an example when she responded to that tweet and said, we'll be committing to the Ethereum blockchain the text using a system modified from the one used by Chinese activists earlier this year to record their Me Too accusations. Yeah, so I looked that up on Etherscanner, and like, that's a lot of data. It's a large letter, and they didn't even, it's not like a hash of the data. It's just a U2F8 encoded message of the letter, which is like 17,000 bytes. That's a lot. That's if you were to put that into a Bitcoin block, for example, Bitcoin blocks don't allow that much. Opportuna is more limited, but let's say you could, that would make your block in Bitcoin bigger than some Bitcoin Cash blocks are right now. Like some of them are only a few kilobytes. So that's they're going to hit and consider that, because I also looked at the input data for things like CryptoKitties, which uses a pretty consistent amount of data. It's like I think it was a 256-bit integer, which has all the genetic data. And even that, which is a lot less data than they're planning to use for this thing, even that basically brought down Ethereum for a while. It was the most popular app, which I think it was no more than maybe a couple thousand people at the very height. And Ethereum was struggling with these cats. Like, do you really think that this is not going to be a problem when you're publishing full journalistic articles? Because if your journalism is any good at all, like the stuff that I've done, oh my God, that would be a lot of data to stuff into a blockchain. So if your journalism is any good, you're going to have links to sources, you're going to have the text itself, like you're going to have a ton of information. You can't commit all of that to a blockchain because it's just not space efficient. It doesn't work. You have to be minimalist, and you have to be conservative, and you have to use blockchains for things like timestamping in ways that actually are meaningful and matter. Not everything that you write is going to be something that is going to be censored. That's completely absurd. You try to use it in a way that you're only, making things censorship resistant that you actually think are going to be censored. But otherwise, you don't need it. It's overkill, and you're going to kill Ethereum, which I am not opposed to. But it's just a bit insane.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shinobi.
Now, this just sounds like the most retarded, not thought through fucking money grab nonsense in the world. Publish your content to multiple fucking peers on IPFS, timestamp it with open timestamps, and call it a day. And to boot, you don't just prove somebody's credibility because you put something on a blockchain. Like, that was the most absurd statement in that whole thing that I saw.
Yeah, the Forbes, I don't think I have it up right now, but basically I think it was, yes, I think it was the Forbes version of the announcement. They said that publishing metadata on a blockchain would establish identity and credibility of the journalists involved. And I'm like, no. Like, I had to actually explain that the only thing that timestamping metadata in a blockchain does is say this data existed on or before this time when this transaction was verified. Like, it doesn't say anything about whether the information is valid. Like, you can literally commit to a blockchain 2 + 2 = 5, and it will show up in the blockchain. And like, that doesn't mean it's true. You still have to verify it. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that these people, they don't understand that the critical problem, which I try to focus on in my revision controlled journalism project, is to focus on how to make it easier for everyone to verify information that journalists publish. Like, I want to focus on communicating the information properly that allows people to self-verify, not to make the journalists look more credible because they're doing blockchain. So
yeah, like honestly, you put out a great video just a few days back on revision controlled journalism and dispersion of interpretive power. And yeah, I think anybody that's looking at all the stories, and maybe some guys from Civil are watching this right now, go back and watch that. And, there's a lot of revolutionary stuff that can happen with technology, and Bitcoin and journalism. But just saying that you're, publishing to a blockchain and, this is, yeah, it does feel like a money grab. It does feel like they haven't looked at previous projects, and it does feel like they're completely insincere about like the reality of like what journalism is and what they're trying to do. where your video, I think, really just hit the nail on the head with what, you know, we could do with journalism.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm so tempted to do with all of these blockchain journalism projects coming out is to actually say, hey, look, I'm doing journalism on the blockchain. My blockchain is called Git. Because I'm pretty sure that Git makes a better blockchain than pretty much all of these shit projects.
Yeah, it's it almost feels like, yeah, they're just trying to grab a little bit of notoriety while this whole blockchain hype is still going on. And I wonder, I'm kind of curious how much longer it can really last, because you know, there is real answers. And I mean, like, you know, we're actually starting to see some people in the space that you know, I mean, like, I think it was Leia Kun, I don't know how to pronounce her name, from CoinDesk there. She was on a panel and they asked, like, how can blockchain affect the media industry? And, you know, she's like making the point that it's already affected the industry, because, you know, you can take you can give donations to correspondents in war zones, and, you know, you could pay translators with Bitcoin, and, you know, nobody's really monitoring that transaction. So you can get things done without people knowing about it. I mean, like, journalism was always a nitty gritty business, and it seems like they're just trying to polish it up and call it blockchain, and we're good now. Promise you, established tradition, truth, it's there.
Yeah, and one of the things that kind of bothers me, I mean, it really bothers me actually, is that this token pre-sale, in order to get it, you had to not only take this test, but you had to KYC yourself. I don't know how extensive the KYC was, but it was at the very least name, email. I still consider that KYC when you're collecting personal information about people. You know, and if you do that, that's KYC. Which it's like, and they're saying that they're doing it to like keep speculators out of the project, which, like, I'm sorry, you have speculators in your project already. Too late. The fact this thing exists already proves that.
Yeah.
But, like, do you really want to have a network of journalists who feel so safe in their lives that they're willing to dox themselves to a random token network that hasn't even existed for very long? Like, because I mean, if Ethereum moves to the tokens and everything, it's the way that the governance system works is all based on voting, which is based on who has how many tokens. So you're going to have a journalism network or platform full of journalists, or at least the richest or the most influential journalists are going to be the ones who have the least to lose, because they have the ability to KYC themselves and not have any consequences for that. Yeah, not interested. Like, and they were like this Maria woman. I actually originally thought that Civil was going to partner with the New York Times and all of these other outlets, but actually they listed those after her name, and that was places she has written at. And, like, I'm sorry, Forbes, I've never seen a single Forbes article I thought, wow, this is very controversial and contentious, so I bet this is going to get taken down. Like, never. I'm sorry. I mean, oh my God, the Ethereum blockchain getting full of Forbes journalists thinking that they're going to be censored when they just write. I mean, I've never seen a Forbes article that, like, Forbes is very close to TechCrunch in the sense that most of what they publish is public relations stuff, marketing of projects, not really critical analysis. So it's going to be fun to watch this thing. Like, if it works, okay, but I'm just telling you now, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to. I mean, like, you just talk about this gets me thinking about, like, you know, because I mean, it was published on something called Axios, which I haven't even heard of that, and I mean, but it was pushed out through Forbes's Twitter feed, Forbes's crypto Twitter feed, and yeah, I mean, it sounds like maybe it's one of those just scammy things where they're going to be like, in a couple months, you're going to be like, oh, that was just some rogue employees doing something, and somebody made some moves or something, and maybe, but either which way, I mean, like, there is stuff that you know, Bitcoin can help and improve journalism, and, you know, these sort of things just stall that argument. And you know, one of the things that I'd really, yeah, as you were bringing up, is like, this is all on Ethereum contracts. Like, come on, like you know, all this is about, yeah, building out trust models that are different and you know, are robust to where you can be censorship resistant. And this is just yeah, totally lack of like, you know, like, look into this stuff. If you see that like this stuff is being built on Ethereum smart contracts, you should have some red flags showing up pretty much immediately. And yeah, just because we're up on past that hour mark, I'll go ahead and jump into this, talking about Ethereum smart contracts and what can be built on top of it. Okay, let's Janine, you got to take off early today, so what gives you a little outro or a final thought you want to tell some people?
Oh my God, my final thought. Let me look really quick.
Put you on the spot.
I mean, I guess I could, you know, keep my outro simple and I mean, I, like Rick said, I published that revision controlled journalism video for Parallel Polis because I didn't end up attending in person. So I guess watch that and let me know what you think, because this is still a very developing area.
Yeah, definitely go watch that. It's some good video, guys, and appreciate your, you know, yeah, all your tweet threads on this stuff because it's important. All right, so getting into this. Bye. I'm sorry. Yeah, later, girl. All right, so Venezuela, are you gonna say goodbye to now? I can't even get into this. All right, I'm just joking. So yeah, another thing built on Ethereum smart contracts that you know, we should be a little wary of, and I think the market is showing that in Venezuela, is the yeah, the Venezuelan petro and the bolivar. Let's get into this because the Bitcoin volume up there in Venezuela is at an all-time high, and I think we all know that has something to do with the hyperinflation going on there. But there are a couple of new developments that have pushed even more people into using Bitcoin down there. So statistics from CoinDance covering local Bitcoin's trading volume showed that Venezuelans converted a total of 1,073 Bitcoins, which is the most since the record keeping began in 2013. And some of the catalysts is for this are the Bolivar's redenomination back in August to the quote sovereign Bolivar, which is supposed to account for 100,000 regular bolivars. So like the Bolivar is the Venezuelan currency, and in August, in about mid-August, you know, President goodness, his name escapes me right now. Maduro. Maduro, that's it. Yeah, I was trying to think of it. I know it's Maduro. Okay. So yeah, he proposed this sovereign bolivar, which is supposed to account for 100,000 bolivars. So maybe people aren't carrying around wads of cash to get stuff, but it's an attempt to create a fiat currency anchored to the petro cryptocurrency, or not crypto. I guess it's just a token, which is pegged to the oil reserves. So it's like the petro is an ERC20 token, and it's pegged to oil reserves, which oil reserves you can't really, you know, as somebody that did some surveying, you can't really fully measure all that out. It's not going to be exact. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty scammy, and it sounds pretty bad. And you know, and sounds on October 2nd, some of the details about the use case for the petro is not making it sound much better. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez revealed that all new passport applications and extensions could only be paid using the petro. The price of a new passport will be 2 petros, and an extension will cost 1 petro. And this use case for the petro-backed passports is to serve another purpose, to try and regulate the estimated 5,000 citizens fleeing Venezuela every day. So things are not looking much better in the development of the Venezuelan-backed system to stem this hyperinflation nightmare they're going through. However, Bitcoin is there and it works, and this is why this volume is increasing. And I think this trend upward will continue as you know, as we see this faith in all these old institutions and systems die out. And I mean, especially all this like backed on nothing, and you know, people start to really understand the way that money works as time goes on. I think we'll just start to see more and more people move over towards a system that will protect them through these moments, even whenever they're, you know, the people in charge are saying, you know, no, this is going to protect you. This is going to do the right thing. And, you know, as we're seeing now, it looks like, you know, their whole crew over there getting this petro together. It's not really shaping up to build any real trust into the government, and the people are sort of they're moving over to Bitcoin for that. So yeah, we've seen an all-time high Bitcoin volume in Venezuela, man. I think that's some pretty shocking news, or is that like I guess that's just like on the road, right? Like that's the way I've been thinking about it. Like, yeah, that's gonna happen. It's gonna keep happening. But what do you think about
So
this?
you're telling me when the price of the petro goes up, it means people are fleeing Venezuela now? Got it.
I guess so, man. I haven't really checked the price of the petro. Just really, you know, yeah, petro. I don't know. Is that thing even launched yet? I thought it was still like all just in pre-sale development phase. Like it's not actually launched, is it?
Well, I assume it is, given that they're accepting it for things, but I still have not checked it out in a while. I'm not even sure if they're still running on NEM or they went back. I'm not even sure at this point what blockchain it's on. It's just like this is just a pathetic flailing attempt by a fucking lunatic socialist dictator to try to fucking keep control on things.
Yeah, but I mean, it does. It shows that. Yeah, it's like the trust system in the government there is like what's causing a lot of people there to move over to Bitcoin, and I think that's just kind of a good segue into this other story about what's going on in Dubai. In Dubai, you know, is set to get their own state-backed cryptocurrency in motion. We've discussed their move to be the first blockchain society, where the nation is preparing its infrastructure to be completely overhauled using their own blockchain, Mcash. And now the city has partnered with a payment provider called PundiX or Pundix to develop a point of sale system to be used exclusively with the state-sponsored currency. And the United Arab Emirates will be able to pay their bills, retail purchases, school fees, and other utilities with this point of sale and Mcash, according to this local media source. And two other companies the city has partnered with are eBook FinTech and Loyalty Lab to try and provide loyalty solutions for these markets. And a spokesperson from mCredit said, quote, "To be the world's first city to offer blockchain-based payment solutions to our residents is an exciting moment for Dubai. It confirms Dubai's status as an international tech hub. Deploying cutting-edge technology such as blockchain is a key priority and is delivering benefits to our citizens in the form of convenience and securities to customers and merchants across Dubai." Yeah, that's the quote about international tech hub using blockchain, not Bitcoin. I don't know. But however, there are a lot of the things coming together there over in Dubai with blockchains, you know, and crypto in general. They've already put plans into place for a blockchain-based vehicle and land management system. Also, they're trying to democratize tourism, quote unquote, by allowing these so-called business-to-business smart contracts. And Dubai's largest bank went live with a blockchain-based project to reduce check fraud. And most recently, the city announced the Smart Dubai Initiative, which aims to create a blockchain-powered government. So in contrast to Venezuela, it looks like Dubai is setting themselves up as this, you know, one of these blockchain, not Bitcoin markets. However, there seems to be a lot more trust in the government of the UAE to manage this system correctly, unlike the Venezuelan petro. So, you know, I think it's got a more likelihood to actually get some real development done. But I mean, you know, I just, you know, worry about these people running off into doing the blockchain, not Bitcoin thing. And, you know, they're not really thinking about what kind of problems could show up whenever with their security issues, whenever enough value is accrued on a chain, and the possibilities of game theory and, you know, I mean, it just seems like that it's rife to be taken down and become honeypots, and, you know, they could lose a lot of money. But we'll see how it goes. I'm just following along with these developments in these different nation states and seeing how Bitcoin is affecting things.
Yeah, I don't think that's really going to pan out anywhere. I mean, like, I've probably gone on about this point ad nauseum on the show, but you try making a state-sponsored digital currency and you're pretty much destroying the entire financial infrastructure and market in your entire country. Like, banks aren't compatible with that. When you can use it without a bank, how does a bank exist? They don't make loans, they don't earn interest off money. Like, whatever central entity is managing your state cryptocurrency is doing all that and pretty much directly competing with those businesses. Like, it's just not compatible with a fiat system in a world where in most developed countries the financial sector is a gigantic portion of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say how it's going to shake out completely, but I guess we could say that, yeah, it's not looking like they understand how exactly these things work together and whether or not it's the right move to do this, because yeah, there's certainly, like, just similar like with Janine's last story where people just want to throw blockchain on something. It feels like we are kind of, yeah, like that is, we're still in that madness, the blockchain, not Bitcoin. It still comes back around, and these guys have been working on this for like a year, and we'll see where it goes. But like we're saying, there's lots of misunderstandings there about the way that these systems interact and what exactly they're going for in their end goals. But we'll see.
All right, though, some other news. Breaking news. Liquid is now officially live. The network has gone live on mainnet, and after 3 years, Blockstream has finally launched its first commercial product. And they have a list of most of the exchanges that are participating in this. Autonomy, Atlantic Financial, let that sink in, Bitbank, Bitfinex, Bitmax, BitMEX, Bitso, BTC Box, BTSE, Booled Exchange, D Group, Coinon, Crypto Garage, a Japanese company that Blockstream had been collaborating with as of last year, GoPax, Corbit, L2B Global, OKCoin, The Rock Trading, Six Digital Exchange, the Swiss Stock Exchange, UnoCoin, Zappo, XBTO, and Zafe. So, some legacy financial companies in there. That's interesting.
Yeah, man, I'm like pulling up the site and listening to those names as you were calling them out. I mean, sounds like there's some people that are wanting to use this as their liquidity mover for their exchange, I guess. Maybe the stable coin trend will slow down a little bit,
or maybe it'll start migrating over to liquid. But I mean, regardless, like, there are some big names in here. I mean, Finex is a lead in the marketplace. I mean, Zafe and Coining are pretty big Japanese exchanges. Corbit is another big, South Korean exchange. OKCoin and Bitso is a big South American exchange. Zappo, like BitMEX. I mean, that is going to be pretty interesting to see BitMEX plug into liquidity pools like this. I mean, it's going to be very interesting. But following just the going live on the network, it's probably going to take some time for these exchanges to start integrating the user end, where they can actually offer the use of coins and liquid for transfers to their users. So even though the network is live, it'll probably be a little bit of a slow wait as each of these exchanges slowly starts integrating it into their systems on the user interface end. But also, pretty soon, there is going to be a wallet released by Blockstream specifically for liquid transactions. Green Address already has support for liquid. And Ledger and Trezor are announcing plans to adopt integration for liquid as well. So not only is this pretty much going to slowly start rolling out in terms of use for traders on the exchanges that they use and offer a lot of interesting dynamics for arbitrage trades, but pretty quickly it looks like they're going to start rolling out wallets for people to directly interact with the network for the confidential assets functionality, which pretty much allows people to issue their own tokens on liquid. So this is going to be pretty fucking interesting over the next month or so as things start rolling out. Maybe I'll even make a scam token.
Right. Yeah. I wonder how many more tokens we'll see issued, or yeah, I mean, just seeing these big names, use it, like, all partnered with Liquid and Blockstream. I mean, like, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people like to, scream Blockstream and conspiracies. But I mean, they're some of the smartest guys in the space, and they've been working on this for a long time, like you said. And I mean, it's been a problem that exchanges have had to make do with what's available. But now that this is coming on live, I think we'll see a lot more, maybe a lot more people moving over than just the initial listed right here. And I mean, geez, that's just a great thing for the overall ecosystem. I mean, like, between this TxTenna, I mean, like, there's just like some major news developments happening this week, man. Like, yeah, it's pretty crazy to see that that go live. I'd like to, kind of dig into it some more, but it's kind of hard to when we're live on air right now. But I mean, yeah, it's pretty great to see that sidechain finally go live.
Fun times ahead. Fun times. Speaking of fun times, though, and liquidity starting to find on-ramps, Yale is in the news now because their endowment manager has sunk some money into some crypto hedge funds, which is he sunk some money into Andreessen Horowitz crypto fund, which opened this summer, as well as Paradigm, a fund started by Fred Ersham from Coinbase. So this is interesting to say the least. I mean, everybody's so obsessed with hedge funds jumping into things, with all of these ETFs currently under scrutiny by the SEC, with things like Backed allowing a lot of Wall Street to come in. It's kind of ignoring, more less known things like endowment funds, which are actually sitting on a pretty big chunk of money. I mean, it's a fund type, obviously universities use this. They sink their money into and invest it and pull from that for all kinds of things, from, campus improvements to new programs. Hospitals use them to actually fund, expansions and new equipment and shit like that. Churches, there's even nonprofits. I mean, there are a lot of different organization types that have endowment funds set up to invest their money to actually try to see a return, while still periodically withdrawing a lot of that for actual use. And it's a market I haven't really seen anybody talk about. So, to really think about what this could mean in terms of, everybody's always saying that institutional money is just sitting on the sidelines, biting their nails, looking for on-ramps to get into the space. Well, this is part of that institutional money nobody's really thought about. And especially given the general attitude going on in academia in countries like the US, I mean, well, less and less people are really looking to enroll in this. There's just all kinds of public backlash. I mean, there's even been a lot of states that are looking at state-funded schools and defunding them in response to a lot of the curriculum that they're teaching there. And this would be a pretty high risk, high reward way to kind of hedge against defunding or loss of tuition revenue and shit like that.
Yeah, I know, right? And I mean, eventually the rooster's going to come home to nest, or whatever the saying is about those student loans. I mean, geez, how in the world are they going to get all the money back on that? But I mean, like, maybe they're not even actually involved in that too much. But yeah, the endowment is something that I didn't hear mentioned whenever people discuss like mutual funds and like all these different avenues with ETFs and things like that. And yeah, I mean, it seems that institutional investors that really want to get their feet wet in Bitcoin and crypto, I think there's like several avenues here. And yeah, doesn't seem like this guy, David Swinson, I think his name is, that made this investment. He's like known as the Warren Buffett there on campus. So, I mean, he's already made them a fortune with running the endowment for a while now and with his investment. So it seems to be another move that is pretty smart. I mean, like I'm, don't like to get too big into market price stuff, but I mean, it does seem like we've kind of been meandering around a floor here. And, yeah, we've seen BACT come up and the mutual funds from Canada, or that mutual fund from Canada come online. I mean, yeah, institutional people are here. And yeah, I mean, like that's why we are not below 5,000. I mean, geez, we're still above 6,000, and it's really kind of amazing that we're still here with all these developments and everything. But whatever. Like I'm just along for the ride. But yeah, I mean, endowment funds. Yeah, I mean, they could definitely make some money on the side. Kind of like I guess Overstock. They did really good on the price rise. They were able to spend a lot of. They had a lot of profit returns that quarter last year, last year's fourth quarter, because of the price rise, and or I guess all of last year really. And so, I mean, similarly, yeah, it would be nice to have an investment in Bitcoin, and whenever the system moves up, yeah, like now we've got enough to build that new library, or get on a bunch of new students through a new scholarship program, or yeah, it's definitely a good idea, and it sounds like there was a pretty smart guy looking at the prospects whenever he made the move.
Mm-hmm. And I guess quick mention in other news, almost a week ago now, but Gemini announced that they have an insurance policy for crypto funds under their custody that's actually being offered through a consortium of different insurers after Gemini went through an audit to show that they actually have a solid risk management and security setup. So this, following on a lot of South Korean insurance companies being in negotiations with exchanges for insurance policies over there, I think this could potentially turn into a wave of things that a lot of different insurance companies start considering. I mean, when you really start to think about the dynamics, like there's a pretty high risk on the insurance company's part in terms of actually having to pay up for losses, but you can also mitigate that, and pretty much every exchange out there does, by segregating cold storage and hot storage. So you can very much narrow the scope of that risk at any given time. But at the same time, this is still a basis for insurance companies to charge a pretty high premium. I mean, like this is an asset that you really can't just replace. All you can do is kind of cough up the nominal value in fiat. And this could turn into really a pretty decent profit margin for insurance companies out there, especially if, like they did in this case, they really hold any company that they insure to a very high standard in terms of security. It's still not removing the risk on their part and the basis for charging a higher than normal premium. So
Yeah, I mean, if you can get the custody and security right, man, that's definitely a place to make some money. But yeah, I think everybody was real like, yeah, it was about a week ago this news broke. I think one of the main points people were bringing up was just like, this is another thing that people needed in the checkbox for an ETF, and they got their regulated exchanges and insurance-backed custody solutions. So, like whatever all these check boxes are to get the rest of these people that haven't found their way into the system, I imagine this is one of the major check boxes that people needed to get checked. So now maybe some of these people that have trusted their value towards another system for their whole life can trust Bitcoin and crypto. I mean, like, yeah, it is a good development, though. I mean, like, it's something where we talked about that. I think it was in Japan where they were talking about insuring some of these exchanges because of because of the hacks that have been happening, and just sort of setting that up making the industry more robust, where when customers do come in, if there is custodial problems, they don't get hurt too bad, and they have an option. So yeah, big news again out of Gemini. They're making moves over there with these regulators and finding their way in the space, and we'll see how the market chooses to work with it.
Alrighty, though, moving on into ICOs. Spankchain. You know that porn coin?
I always see that guy wearing those Spankchain hats.
So they literally recreated the security vulnerability of the DAO almost exactly, and lost about 165 Ethereum, worth around 38 grand. And pretty much this entire thing functions using a kind of payment channel enforced by a smart contract. And what happened here is there's pretty much a structure where you go to fund the channel, and there is an exit clause in the contract that allows it to pretty much be yanked back before the other party commits funds to it. And the way that the contract is structured, it refunds you your money, but doesn't actually zero out the balance on chain until after you've exited that refund clause in the contract. And this attacker was able to pretty much recursively keep calling this refund function and drain a large amount of money from the contract, literally exactly like the DAO bug, where they were able to effectively create their own contract and just make recursive calls, draining funds from this because it was not properly managing state in the right order, and effectively introducing a bug before the function would actually finish executing and push all of the results to the chain. So literally, like, it's what, 2 years later now, and you still have people out there who have no fucking clue how to actually securely code something in Solidity. And the hilarious thing is, they intentionally chose not to have their smart contract audited because it was not cost effective in terms of the amount of value that it actually dealt with. So, like, not only did they repeat like the one bug that was so widely demonstrated as the thing not to do in the biggest fuck up in the Ethereum chain's history, but they just went, no, we don't need a security audit. Let's just roll with it.
Jeez, man. Yeah, I was looking through the story and I was just like thinking, like, how in the world do people not prepare for that sort of bug whenever this happened so long ago and it was so infamous? Like, you think they're like Ethereum Foundation would have like a protocol where it's like, if you're going to build on our platform, you must avoid this sort of situation, where someone could recursive, like just withdraw funds from wallets. And I mean, yeah, you're seeing it here where they, it was like the cost of the audit. They lost, I think the cost of the audit was like 50K, and now they lost like a little over that, and now they're going to have to pay for the security audit anyway if they want this thing to be taken seriously. I mean, yeah, I mean the Ethereum platform. I've got friends that are doing stuff on there, and my sympathies for them, but there's definitely been like some problems shown up there with the DAO, the crypto kitties. Like there's these problems with the parity wallet. There's multiple things where you should be wary of projects built on Ethereum, and you shouldn't be too surprised that something like this happened. I was a little surprised because it was so similar to the DAO hack that was still, that vulnerability was still there. But you got people moving fast and loose saying like, yeah, we don't need a security audit. This is what happens. And in crypto, if you don't have your security in order, it is you're gonna get your lunch eaten. It's just a fact about value and data and the way that it works.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, this is just like why this entire platform is just not sustainable. It just really isn't. Like it's like the entire idea behind Ethereum is like the stupidest idea in the world. Let's take a Turing complete system where every single fuck up you can make in any general programming context that handles billions of dollars. And let's set it up so that any web developer can just start building things to manage money and raise money with nothing to really stop them except the threat of legal action, and give people tools to manage their money. It's the stupidest fucking idea in the world. It's like, hey, let's just set up a tent where anybody can come up and bring tools and just work on your car. Like that's fucking retarded. There's a reason people specialize in skills. There's a reason that division of labor has led to a world where you're really good at this thing, so you do that. And you're really good at that thing, so you do that. And you don't just have the bar for doing something dropped so absurdly low that you have people running in circles trying to do all kinds of things they're not really competent enough to do. Like, this is the end result. This is what you get. Something where things are constantly breaking. Nothing is working properly. There is always security flaws or vulnerabilities being found. And that's not the kind of system that you want to be using to manage your money. Like, you really need to get your head examined if you think that this is in any way a good idea.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that needs to be done, man. I mean, I know some of these guys are smart. It's just like, they're smart in some ways, but not in others. And yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. You're right. I've been the fact that the platform's got its problems, and I don't want to beat it up too much because I don't know who's watching. I don't want to step on too many toes.
Fair enough. In other news, though, the IMF is once again reiterating cryptocurrency's growth and the risk of creating instabilities or vulnerabilities in the world economy. And for anybody who's paid attention to Christine Lagarde, this is really something that she's been driving home for like the last year or two. And this comes on the tail of the World Economic Outlook being published this month, which is really kind of looking at really three different things. The first real area of analysis is kind of looking at policies and the effects that it's having on the economy. And this has kind of resulted in a little bit of a drop in their projected rate of growth for the world economy over the next year or so. But it's mostly really looking at trade policies, specifically in the West, i.e., the trade war that America is starting to get itself engaged with because of Mr. President / God Emperor Trump. And a lot of dynamics as far as just, oil import ratios, the developing economies, and some specific regional factors going on there, and really how this is going to affect global growth. As well as the next section, they pretty much are just looking at the aftermath of the financial meltdown in 08 and really looking at the fact that, recovery has been ongoing, but there's still lasting damage here. And really the only kind of differentiating factor you can make is that countries that were doing all right before the collapse are not hit as bad in terms of economic output as countries that were already dealing with serious problems before the collapse. And then the third one, looking at monetary policies, specifically the inflation rates in a number of different countries. And the IMF right now, at least, is kind of looking at inflation in areas like Iran and Turkey and Venezuela and kind of writing them off as just country-specific conditions and not really a result of systemic issues going on in the global economy overall. But they are really kind of talking a lot about inflation here, and more importantly, people's attitudes about it and how that's going to affect economic activity afterwards. Because the IMF's also recently started talking about inflation projections in a lot of different countries. One of the biggest examples, India, and is kind of projecting overall an increase in inflation over the next year or so. And, this is really the exact kind of dynamic that a lot of Bitcoiners look at as what could potentially cause a huge inflow of capital into this ecosystem. It's the more you see inflation, the more you see uncertainty in the legacy markets, the more it makes sense to hedge a little bit into an asset like Bitcoin that is finitely capped and pretty much guaranteed to continue appreciating in price so long as demand doesn't dissipate. And, they're not really wrong, unlike the Bank of International Settlement, who's kind of just been dismissing things and crying, stop printing money, that this really does have a lot of implications for the world economy. The bigger this ecosystem starts to grow. You're talking about disappearing liquidity and capital in other markets. If demand were to heavily shift from the fiat currencies, real estate, the stock market, and shift over into something like Bitcoin, that would have profound effects. Like just the potential that Bitcoin could function as a way to actually move capital back and forth in a way that they don't really have any kind of mechanism to control or incentivize to do something else. Like the bigger things get, the less control they have over things, and the more those effects are going to compound in terms of consequences for the legacy economy. I mean, if people throwing money into the stock market over the next year to start pulling that money out and moving into something like Bitcoin, that's pretty much the metric for the economy. Like that's not something to just laugh at, or that's going to be inconsequential to the world economy at large. I mean, it's not something they can just ignore. Like if this continues growing, this is going to continue becoming more and more important to the economy at large, and they're going to have to try to do something, or they're just going to effectively completely lose control over the economy.
Yeah, guys like the IMF, I look at, and like Bank of International Settlements, IMF, the Fed. It's like listening to these different discussion points about the same problems that they're running into, and yeah, imagine that. I'm not imagine. I mean, like we know that crypto is going to have a big effect on the economy, and it's pretty interesting to see like these guys have their own little different hot takes on these things, but. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, like I really thought that they were talking about the systemic risk of all these like, these like maddening amounts of ICOs and everything like that. But they're not talking about that, huh? They're talking about the systemic risk of people not wanting to use the local or the fiat currency of that region. However, whatever they're saying, I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. The IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, the Fed, like it seems like they all kind of got some different perspectives on this, and they're not on I don't know. I really don't know what to think about this story, man. I'm like sitting here just thinking like, what do I think about the IMF has to say about how crypto affects the economy? I don't know. It's like one of these guys that's just sort of observing their own demise, and I'm sure they got a take on it.
Alrighty, well, next two up really aren't that much to talk about. It's really just two breakdowns. I guess Byteway or MicroBT, as it's been translated to English, is being covered in Bloomberg as far as their attempt to challenge Bitmain's monopoly, and specifically Yang, the CEO, and his previous relationship as an engineer for Bitmain. And really, I just like this is just here to kind of fucking paint a little bit of different context to it. I mean, it really the recent coverage we've been kind of giving them has all been crypto specific news sources, things that don't really circulate widely to people outside of this space who are actively involved. And I think this is really kind of showing a continuing shift against Bitmain's favor, like breaking into the mainstream media like this. Like I'm pretty sure before this article was published, a lot of people who don't really follow the space too intently or go around scouring for news probably weren't aware of this company, or even like knew that there has been a big migration of employees from Bitmain. And I think like the more information like this really starts circulating out to the mainstream and actually sinking into people's heads, that's really going to have a much more important change in attitude as far as Bitmain's role in this ecosystem than some place like CoinDesk publishing this, or us here on the digest, or people talking about it on Twitter. Like as much as we're active in this space, like there's not really that many eyes on things or paying attention to any of this. But when things really poke out into an article or a publication like Bloomberg, that's when things really start circulating out. And so I'm hoping that this really kind of continues as far as more skeptical, outlook or analysis of Bitmain in the mainstream media, and not just kind of looking at them as, oh, a big Bitcoin company. Great. They must be doing something right. Because like this is the kind of reach you actually have to achieve in order to actually have some kind of effect on market attitude. Like us sitting here and screaming on crypto Twitter, that circulates things out to people actively involved, and gives them a clue to try and circulate that out farther. But it's, as much as I wish it weren't the case, it's nowhere near as effective as something being talked about in Bloomberg like this. Like millions of people are going to be exposed to this now, as opposed to maybe a few tens of thousands, like more closely knit inside the ecosystem.
Yeah, good to see, like I mean, I'm sure, yeah, Bloomberg probably reaches more eyes than anybody niche in the space. And yeah, it's hopefully more people on the outward side of this mining ecosystem, and people that are jumping in, they can see that, yeah, that's Bitmain's got competitors, and they've got problems, and or some some issues. So hopefully it'll come up, man. Actually, it's funny. I was actually flipping through the news. I saw a guy, Linus Tech Tips. He did a story on a mining Wi-Fi router from Bitmain and how ridiculous it is. It's got a clock and it's got a ridiculous one Ethernet port with no other gateway. It's a funny video, and I'm just looking, it's already reached over 500,000 people, so that's a good thing. The news is spreading that Bitmain has got troubles.
And last little touch, a little more details about what Bitfury is doing with their new mining chip. They have launched a new product, the Bitfury Tardis, which I don't really know how to feel with, because fuck you, Bitmain, and using that name. But it's a 80 terahash small scale mining unit, which is a pretty big change for them recently, because this is something that could actually be purchased or sold at much smaller scale. Previously, as far as I was aware, before this product was launched, really all they did was sell bulk actual ASIC chips for people to install or assemble into their own hardware themselves, or their big cargo container, which cost millions of dollars. So they weren't really selling any kind of product that was viable outside of very large scale operations. And I think this is really just another thing kind of showing a lot of people in this ecosystem are starting to smell blood in the water in terms of Bitmain. To see Bitfury kind of move into launching a smaller product like this, it doesn't make sense to me, except them trying to kind of capture some of that market that Bitmain's really monopolized in terms of small scale units that are very flexible in terms of how many they can order. I mean, the cargo container that Bitfury's been making money off of, you have to have a very large scale operation or a large amount of capital to sink in initially to blow a few $1 million just to get a single unit set up and running. And I mean, that's not really a viable way to kind of tap into the market for a lot of smaller operations, or into the market of people just housing hardware in other people's warehouses, which is kind of a way that a lot of people have been getting around a lot of the upfront costs. And that's a pretty big niche in the market. You just purchase the hardware and we'll actually house it and run it for you. And that's not really viable when, if you want to go buy something from Bitfury, you're going to need at least, $5 million or something to buy a cargo container.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even really think about that whenever I was reading this. I was just like, oh yeah, that's great, more competition. But yeah, it does sort of a sign of blood in the water of hey, we can grab a little bit of this market. So yeah, pretty smart move on their part. Bitfury with their storage unit size mining rigs, those aren't really good for retail. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they can jump in there and take some of this, because I've been seeing a lot of ant miners on Craigslist, a few of them with blown out circuits and stuff. So yeah, that market really is probably whining for looking for something. So it'd be good to get a hand on some what are these Clark 14 nanometer chips, see how those things go.
I guess that rounds us off for the day and takes us into final thoughts. And I kind of wanted to bring up the whole situation going on with Supermicro. And part of the reason that's not really a proper story today is there's not really many details. And pretty much every company that's been named in the recent few articles from Bloomberg is actively denied having their systems compromised by any of the supposed malicious chips on Supermicro boards. But this is a pretty serious issue going on right now. I mean, the potential for a supply chain to be tactically compromised like that is a huge national security issue for really any country out there that's buying hardware equipment from China. And I mean, you know, with this specific incident, there's not really much to go on except accusations without any kind of concrete evidence put forward whatsoever, and a denial from pretty much every single company that's been named. I mean, in the initial one, Apple and Amazon were named. Both have denied any vulnerability to this. And to add a little bit of weirdness to that, Apple a couple years ago actually stopped using Supermicro servers in their server farms. And then just today, I believe they posted, or Bloomberg posted another article claiming that a major American telecom company was compromised by malicious chips on a Supermicro server board. And I've seen a lot of people out there who've contacted pretty much every major telecommunications company in the United States, and they're all denying it. So I don't really know what to make of this instance, whether this is true and these companies are under a gag order, whether this is just drumming up shit as justification for ratcheting up the ongoing trade war with China. I don't know. But in the abstract, beyond this specific incident, it's ridiculously naive to think that this kind of stuff doesn't actually happen. I mean, to think that nobody does stuff like this is just sticking your head in the sand.
Are you talking about the China? I didn't catch like the very intro. Are you talking about the dragonfly or something else?
No, the server's compromised.
Okay. Well, yeah, man. I'm gonna have to look into that because I'm not really been doing some stuff with the family. I'm not quite sure what servers were compromised.
Mm-hmm. But I don't know. You got any thoughts, Rick?
Yeah, man. Just want to quick shout out to Bitcoin Sage. I don't know if you guys can recognize my my bandwidth is a little bit better. I had somebody come in and help me out, clean up some of these, these sockets where it should be working a little bit better, hopefully. And just wanted to let everybody know about Stop and Decrypt's other Twitter account because of that, where he was banned. So Stop and Decrypto. So Stop and Decrypt just with the O at the end. So Stop and Decrypto. And then just like wanted to point out this stupid economist newspaper people keep bringing up to me where they're like, oh, Bitcoin was created by, all these people behind the scenes to try and take over the world. It's like, but today it's like the date on that eagle's neck, 10/10/2018. Get ready for a world currency. So whatever, after today, I don't want to hear anything else about it because, I've already heard too much about it. So we're passing through through whatever, the
Eye of the Phoenix.
The Eye of the Phoenix. All right. Yeah. So, yeah, follow Stop and Decrypto. Bitcoin Sage, thanks for the help. And let's not talk about the stupid Economist front page from the 80s anymore after today.
Mm-hmm. So I guess on that note, guys, it's a toodaloo, and we will see you all on Sunday. Adios.
Later, everyone.